Glad to have you back. My next guest on the program today is economist and Chief Executive Officer, Financial Derivatives Company, Bismarck Rewane. Good morning to you, Mr. Rewane. Thank you so much for joining me on the program.
Good morning, Harry.
So, a lot has been said about Nigeria, even though I know you went on a summer holiday, but you kept tabs on what was actually going on back home. A lot has been said about Nigeria in recession. You've also said a lot about this here on the program. Talked about the low-hanging fruits, and when we started up the show, we actually tried to look at those low-hanging fruits, you know, the tech startups and technological entrepreneurs. But have your views changed since the last time we had conversation about Nigeria in a recession?
First of all, we're talking to the audience, and the audience wants to know what is a recession. Okay, a recession is a economic condition, which is an ailment. It's a situation of, it has 6 or 7 clear characteristics. First of all, it's a condition where there's a contraction in economic activity, a severe contraction in economic activity. And at times, rule of the thumb is that 2 consecutive quarters of negative growth tells you that you're in a recession. But what happens when you are in a recession? There are types of recession. There's mild, deep, severe, chronic, and then you get into a depression.
So which one is Nigeria in?
Mild, because we have a cumulative contraction of minus 2.4% so far, first half year. But what happens in a recession if unattended to, right? It's like a medical condition. If you don't take your medication, you would have high unemployment. You will have, you know, in a perverse way, you will have declining inflation. In a recession, inflation actually comes down. Now, so you will have declining inflation, you will have high unemployment, you will have bank failures, you will have corporate drop in profitability. Then you will have what we call a psychological and mental recession, which leads to high suicide rates, right? And this has happened in many countries. So you could, and then the way you deal with it will tell you the outcomes. You're either going to have an outcome like Venezuela, or you're going to have an outcome like Thailand that went through it and recovered. So let us take a few minutes to look at exactly what condition we are in. The condition we are in is that our GDP growth is minus 2.06 second quarter, but cumulatively minus 2.64. Our inflation is 17.1, but month-on-month inflation is actually down to 0.6, and when you annualize that, it comes to 7.4%. So if you use the annual year-on-year base year effect, you have inflation of 17.1. But if you use the monthly inflation and annualize it, you get 7.4. So I'm coming back to what we need to do to get out of here, because Nigerians know the problem, but I want to situate it and put some context before we now go to how we're going to get out. We have under and unemployment, both of them combined, of 32.6. And people between the ages of 18 and 24, we have unemployment rate of 24%, which is very high. These are active youths who, if they're not positively engaged, will engage in dysfunctional behavior. You have a misery index of 49.7. 49.7% of the Nigerian public are miserable. We have vacancy factor. Houses are empty, which is also another symptom of a recession. And we have contracting PMI to 42.1. Consumer confidence is low. People are not buying. People are afraid that if they spend their money and they get unemployed, they get fired, they will have no money. And what you need to get out of recession is increased consumption, increased buying. So everybody is saving money, and which is bad. So we call it paradox of thrift, and those are the key things.
You're saving money that sometimes it's not regular, or you don't even have at all.
Yes.
At least for most of those states that are still, owing their salaries, their workers.
That's savings. That's compulsory savings. If you haven't been paid, then your employer is saving it for you negatively.
If your employer is even saving it for when eventually it comes, does it come in bulk or does it come in piecemeals? So that at the end of the day, you begin to wonder if it has any value at all. But coming back to consumer and investors' confidence, at this time, there are growing calls for powerful stimulus packages to realign the economy. Now, everybody seems to be looking both ways, at the monetary and at the fiscal side. But more and more, everybody is looking at the monetary side because they feel they're the ones that regulate how much interest rates will be and how the banks will do on lending. So in terms of, this stimulus packages to realign the economy, most say they're not coming from the fiscal authorities, as I just mentioned, but more from the monetary authorities? What do you think?
First and foremost, the monetary policy has limited role in fiscal stimulus. All they do is to complement it. And I'm coming back to, so what's the way out of this? Right? We need to stimulate this economy. We need to set targets. We need to increase aggregate consumption, which is at about $290 billion now to $340 billion. We need to increase consumer confidence, which is minus 24 to 9.5. We need to get the manufacturing PMI from 42 to 53. And we need to get gross fixed investment, capital expenditure. So what is happening today? Our revenues are 46% below target, government revenues. And in that amount, what we have spent, we are spending 43% of government money on personnel costs, 28% on interest, and only 12% on capital expenditure. You will never get out of the recession that way. I don't care what you say about it. The reality is that this recession is going to take you at least 12 to 18 months to get out of, right? And that is what we call a U-curve. Now, to do this, we need to, first and foremost, we must inject money into the system. And President Buhari has said it. You can see he's now fully engaged. He's coming out and talking about every issue, right? The Vice President is also coming out. So the executive is fully engaged. You can't hide in this. And you can't blame the past administration. You have to deal with the current problems as you have it.
But then, sorry to cut you here, but as you're disbursing the monies are passing through CBN, passing through the banks. But how quickly will it get to this, the middleman, that's the CBN, the deposit money banks?
No, it doesn't work that way. If I pay a contractor and he pays other subcontractors who hire people, who buy sand, who buy iron rods, who buy this, that is economic activity. So the banks are intermediaries to lend and are, if possible, to make transactions flow easily. But what is happening today? Let me tell you what's happening today. 27.5% of every deposit you put in a bank, 5% statutory and 22.5% are kept away as CRR. It's not available. In addition to that, we have issued treasury bills and treasury certificates at astronomical rates, all right, of almost 4 trillion naira when you put everything together. So when you put all together, almost 35% of money supply has been sterilized. If you don't release this money back into the system, you will not get out of this recession. So monetary policy and monetary conditions are two different things. The monetary conditions are tight, and the monetary policy is even making it tighter. Britain had the same situation after going out of Brexit. The currency dropped by 14% in value. What did they do? They brought down interest rates. You need to bring down interest rates immediately, or else you will strangulate this economy, right, into complete choking. And that's what's happening right now. So what's the way out? Given the fall in oil revenues, you have to increase the deficit plan for the recovery. You must borrow, and the president has said we're going to borrow at least $5 billion externally. We must sell some assets. When you're in this kind of situation, you have to sell assets. It's like you are buying blood from a blood bank to give a patient who is sick. So we will issue monies from the Eurobond on the 19th of September. The federal government would have the proposals from the advisors. They'll pick advisors, 2 advisors to advise them on this. You have to look at the minimum wage and the social intervention programs, because a devaluation, a recession means that people's incomes are falling. You need to make good about this.
But we've also seen that in most cases intervention fund programs have been abused so often.
Well, then that doesn't make it bad. It means that you have to take care of the abusers, right? The fact that people are abusing doesn't mean that the program is bad. It's bad people, not bad programs. Now, you create liquidity in the forex market. Forex market, as it's working today, is not working efficiently, right? You were talking about 308, The truth is that if you go to the airport, people are buying money from the bureau de change and selling it at 420. That's a totally dysfunctional market. We need to get back to it and make sure it works. And that is why, and it will take time before the forex market will stabilize. But luckily, it's beginning to appreciate. We've gone all the way from 425 or 430 all the way down to 420, and it's getting better. But it's a slow, painful process. So we have to curb the abuse. But more than anything else, we are looking for investor confidence. We want investors to be enthusiastic. Right now, they are negative. And we must understand that in bringing down interest rates, we should be looking at year-on-year inflation with base year effects and month-on-month inflation annualized. That way you can actually begin to bring down interest rates and return part of the CRR. You cannot have CRR at 22.5 and the statutory CRR of 5. You must bring back, and when you put that money back into the system, the banks will have the money to lend. Right now, for every 100 naira deposit you have, at least 30 naira is sterilized before they have to, have some in liquid assets. So nobody's lending. All they're doing is buying treasury bills.
So you have definitely something like a storm in a teacup for the CBN's Monetary Policy Committee.
Well, they have their work cut out for them. There's nothing you can do. You must take your responsibilities seriously. And there's a difference between not understanding and misunderstanding. I think there's a lot of misunderstanding of the issues. So, right, a man who doesn't understand, you can teach. But a man who misunderstands, you have to debrief him and change his understanding.
So, let's try to take a look again about, investors' confidence. And talking about, the federal government's plan to borrow low-cost, long-term loans with 1.25% interest rate on a 20-year tenor. Most would ask, and most would say, is this the time to increase borrowing? Is this the time for us to begin to look at that option?
The only way out of a recession everywhere in the world, look at what happened. Let's take two examples. In the US, in 2008 when Obama came, Lehman Brothers, Wall Street collapse, Detroit collapse, Chrysler, General Motors, everybody, unemployment got to 10, 11%. Over a 7-year period, we've been able to bring down interest rates, do quantitative easing, bail out Detroit, bail out Wall Street, set up the TAP, which is the Toxic Asset Relief Program, and all of those things are back. So now Obama is leaving office, and we have unemployment down to 4.9%, and we have growth back to 1.2%. Look at Thailand suffered the same thing in the past. But if you don't do anything, and if you go contractionary, and you go protectionist, which is what happened in the world in 1929, it took 20 years. The world did not recover from that recession and depression till after the Second World War in 1945.
But then, Mr.
So you can be here for 20 years.
How do you borrow when you have a devalued currency?
No, you are borrowing, in fact, you are borrowing dollars, and those dollars are more valuable than your local currency. There's no other way. You borrow, you invest, you sell assets, you do everything. What you want to do is to stimulate economic activity, because there are unemployed resources. If you do not actually stimulate those things and jumpstart that economic activity, you will never get anywhere. The increased productivity that will come because of this increased economic activity, the goods and services produced will be much more than that of the previous year. And divided by the same amount of money, you get, inflation begins to actually decline. That's what you're going to get. The currency will appreciate, but it's not a quick fix. I know we said it that after you have a flexible exchange rate policy, these things will happen. But what we misunderstood, or we did not estimate correctly, was that confidence doesn't come back. It's not like a switch on the wall. It takes time. People are watching you to see, one, whether you're serious, whether you're consistent, whether you're credible, and whether your messenger has the credibility. Your message can be credible, and if your messenger is not credible, then nobody's going to believe you. So all of these things are on us. But now let's focus on the outlook. What will happen? I told you that you have what we call a V curve, which is very quick recovery, which is what the Vice President is hoping for. You have a U curve, which means that you go down and you work for a long period, 18 months, and you get out of it. You have a W curve, which is you go down, you pretend as if you're going to recover very quickly, and then you have a double dip. And you have the L curve, which means that you're going to stay down forever, right? But for us, we think that it's a U curve. We think that once you reduce interest rates, which I think is inevitable, the treasury rates of 18% is stifling and killing this economy. So that comes down, right? You bring down interest rates, you reduce the CRR, you increase public works, you borrow internationally to shore up things, you borrow from the Eurobond market, you also borrow from the export credit agencies, all of this put together, so you have an average rate that is good. And then you incentivize investment, and the economy will take off within 18 months.
All right, Mr. Rewane, thank you so much for joining me on the program and, of course, sharing your perspectives with us. Business Morning returns in just a moment. Stay with us.